So you want to win big in fantasy basketball this season. So you're trying something new. You're planning ahead. In this episode, my special guest is going to walk you through what you need to be on the lookout for in November of 2023 for fantasy basketball. We believe every NBA fan that plays fantasy football should also play fantasy basketball. For 5 years, our guest has worked in the fantasy sports industry, Fantasy Pros, RotoWire, and now he's with NBC Sports. Fantasy basketball fanatics, I introduce to you my man, Zak Hanshew. Welcome back to the show, Zak.
What's good, man? How are you?
Too blessed to be stressed. How about you, my guy?
Man, I cannot complain one bit, brother.
Well, we are weeks into this season, and we wanted to try something new, right? Something that is kind of like a look ahead. You could even look at it like a blueprint for the month, right? So we're going to do a November look ahead. And Zak, you're going to join me every month this season for this one, right?
Absolutely, man.
I'm hyped and honored. So as always, let's just jump right into the value. So the first thing I want to talk about, Zak, is some of the guys that we expected to take off this year. Like, I remember being in some of the forums telling people, like, be careful with Pascal Siakam. People were hyped about him because, Freddie left town, Fred VanVleet left town. Somebody has to pick up the slack. It looks like it's Scotty Barnes is the one that's picking up the slack. So talk to me about, in November, what guys should do with players like Pascal Siakam and even Julius Randle, who's been like stinking up the joint, really. Like, on a historical level, he's been bad, right? So talk to me about, in November, how fantasy managers should look at Siakam and Randle.
Yeah, man. So as you mentioned, Scotty Barnes has just absolutely taken off here in year 3. He's been phenomenal. He's the one that's really been picking up the slack for Toronto since Fred VanVleet left. Pascal Siakam, man, we've got to see some positive regression from him. That's something that I'm going to expect here in November. We're looking at a guy that's averaged better than 20 points, 7 rebounds, almost 5 assists over the last 4 seasons. Pretty solid with the defensive stats, pretty solid shooter. And this season, we've seen his usage dip to 21 after it was over 27 last season. He's shooting, 41%, scoring 15 points per game. All of these numbers are just in the toilet right now, and that's not something that's sustainable for him. He will be better in November. And fantasy managers don't have recourse right now. They can't trade somebody when his value is this low, or they're going to get pennies on the dollar. The best bet right now is to hold steady and hope for better times, which I think are coming.
And what are your thoughts on Randle? Because, I've been a kind of guy, and even, just covering fantasy over the last couple of years, that I was never really high on Randle. The last couple of years, he's really been taking it into overdrive, especially in points leagues, right? He's a points league darling. But this year, it's like, I don't recognize him. Like, what the heck is happening, and how should fantasy managers who have him on the squad, what should they do?
I'm almost going to have to repeat myself on this one, but I mean, he's kind of in the same boat as Siakam. I think you touched on it already. He's shooting, historically bad. He's shooting under 30%. And this is a guy that's been a, better than 20 and 10 guy for the last few seasons, exceeding expectations, seemingly at every turn, for you and for me. And this is a guy that we saw last year. People really got on him for his shooting percentages last season for large stretches. And he ultimately did bounce back and things did settle in. So I know we're early. I know we can kind of, see some trends and make some decisions and some analysis here. But just 2 weeks in, I think we need to, kind of settle it down here on Randle and expect that field goal percentage to start climbing back up.
And I think for both of them, Zak, like you said, that if you tried to move them, right, you're going to get pennies on the dollar for your return, right? So I think in a way, fantasy managers, you have to hold. You made your bed, You drafted these guys,
Yeah.
so you made your bed, you gotta lay in it. That's what mom said, right? So I think that's one thing, especially because November, we're still early in the season, right? But
Yeah.
people want to make moves to salvage things, and the salvage move is not the path in fantasy. It's ride out the storm and see what happens.
Absolutely, man. You never trade a guy when his value is this low.
Yep. So now in November and even leading up to December, we're gonna have the in-season tournament, which honestly, I first, Zach, I don't know about you, but I was kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, what do we, I guess for me, I'm like that old guy, like get off my lawn type. Like, this is not what we do in the NBA, right? We do the finals. That's all that matters. But man, have I enjoyed myself. I've been watching, and it's kind of just giving me an extra spark in terms of the way I'm viewing the game. And I think for the players, especially some of the young players, it's just giving them an opportunity to play in a different type of environment, from the courts, just the energy. Tyrese Halliburton had like a historic performance the other night. So what kind of impact do you think the play-in tournament is going to have on fantasy performances, especially in those games that are getting, closer to them being in the championship game, those qualifying teams? How do you think it's going to impact November production?
Yeah, man. So I think I have to agree with you here. I was a little skeptical about this in-season tournament myself, but we saw Friday we had 7 games. 5 of them were decided by 5 points or less. We had 3 of them that were 1-possession games, 2 points or less. And the courts, the jerseys, the energy, it did feel like a different kind of energy. It felt like teams were, they were frenetic, man. They were excited to be out there and playing. And it gave them a little extra juice. I think that's something that NBA fans kind of bemoan, is that we got 82 games. And NBA players say the same thing. It's a long season, man. It's a grind. So if you can break things up and do this weekly, this weekly tournament, and then ultimately culminate with a championship game, I think it's going to give these players some extra juice. I mean, we saw Warriors and Thunder 141 to 139. There were a lot of great performances in that game, man. Pacers and Cavaliers, you touched on Tyrese Halliburton. Me and the kids turned that game on late after we got back from basketball, and we were watching that one. It was exciting, man. I think we're going to see a lot of extra juice from your star players. And like you mentioned, some of these young guys are going to start stepping up as well as we get closer to the championship and to the knockout rounds.
I love that. And I think for fantasy managers, one little hack, and again, this is the first year that this is happening, so this is just speculation on my part, but I think what'll be worth noting is looking at which teams are qualifying in the next few weeks, kind of circle them on your strategy list or whatever, and start looking at who are the players on the waiver wire, and and monitor the injuries, turn on alerts for those teams, whatever you got to do, because some guys might have to step up and get opportunity. And in that setting, we might see crazy production from guys that we weren't expecting it from.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. So speaking about, performances that we weren't expecting, for me, I thought Jaylen Duren was good. I liked Jaylen Duren, a young guy, especially in dynasty formats. But I didn't expect this, Zach. Like, this has been otherworldly. I've been watching the young man, especially the first few games. I think he was banged up a couple of games. He had some down-to-earth games as well. But overall, you got to be impressed, especially where you drafted him at his ADP during draft season. Like, you got to steal. So my question to you is, will he come down to earth in November? Jaylen Duren from the Detroit Pistons.
No, I think barring any sort of, health concerns, as you mentioned, he's banged up right now. But as long as he stays on the court, I think this is the real deal for him. So we saw flashes of just how dominant he could be, on the glass, as a scorer, as a shot blocker to close out the season. And kind of the Achilles heel for him down the stretch was James Wiseman being inserted into the mix. And we've seen this season that Marvin Bagley's going to get some more run. Wiseman is not going to see so much run. and that they really have, cemented Duren as that starting center with some big minutes. So he's getting almost 30 minutes a night. He's averaging 14 and 11, 1.3 blocks, 0.8 steals, shooting 66% from the field. I don't see a place where those numbers are unsustainable, especially the minutes. That was, to me, the biggest concern was this is a very crowded rotation in Detroit. And the team has really gone with him and said, hey, you're going to be the guy. You're going to play big minutes, and we're going to lean on you. And I think that's what's going to happen throughout November and throughout the rest of the season. So continue to ride Duren.
So really quick about Duren, because he went a lot later than some other young centers, specifically Alperen Şengün. We also have Walker Kessler. I know Walker Kessler has been like a bucket of hot dog water. It's been really bad, right? It's been really bad. And he's had a couple of games where he's been okay, but compared to his ADP, it's been really bad. So Duren or Walker Kessler right now, if you were looking at the two, or if you have any fantasy managers out there who are thinking about proposing deals, do you think Kessler will recover? And also, would it be fair to say that Duren's production is gonna blow him out of the water this season?
I don't know that it's going to blow him out of the water, but I certainly, if I had to take one or the other for the rest of the season, it's going to be Duren. And that's not just, hey, it's been 2 weeks and this is, a couple of huge games and some bad games from Kessler, because Kessler had a 15-15 game last night with 4 blocks. So he can do those kind of things. Problem with Kessler is he's seeing 23 minutes a night as a starter. And that's what he averaged all of last season, between the bench and his starting role. So, a lot of fantasy managers, myself included, were expecting Kessler to blow up this season and see closer to the 30 minutes a night that Duren is seeing. John Collins' arrival in Utah has really put a damper on things. Kelly Olynyk continues to play minutes off the bench. They're giving some run to a lot of guys across this roster. It's a rebuilding team. They have a lot of different options. And that's something that I don't think a lot of folks counted on, again, myself included here. So, I think Duren is absolutely the safer bet between him and Kessler.
And you know what? I have to agree with you, Zach. I think for me, because I was so high on Walker Kessler in the offseason, it's like when you got to eat crow, sometimes you hold off, right? You're like, well, maybe we got a little bit of time. We'll do the month-to-month look ahead and be like, well, it's December, it's January. But I'm hoping he bounces back. Zach, I'm going to pay some bills really quick. This episode is presented to you by BetOnline. The last of the major sports leagues is off and rolling, and college basketball is ready to go as well. BetOnline remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, and NHL are in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. All the hoops betting action along with every sport available at your fingertips on both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and remember, use our promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. So we talked about Kessler. We talked about Duren. This is a conversation I had with my son the other day, and it's going off track, so excuse me a little bit, Zach. So we had this conversation in the car. My 13-year-old, he plays basketball. He's into this stuff, right? So we were talking about the changing of the guard. And I feel like this season, I've talked about more young players than I've talked about in years. There's a whole wave of these young players. And I think it's almost, being driven by Victor Wembanyama coming to the league. It's almost like now LeBron, Curry, KD, hand over the keys to the car. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like, and you're an NBA guy, you're an analyst, you do this for a job, a living. Do you feel this shift coming, the changing of the guard?
Yeah, I absolutely do, man. And it's funny you mentioned that because, that's something that I've been feeling this season as well. Obviously Wemby he's a different type of rookie. I mean, he's more hyped than we've ever seen. But we have a guy like Chet Holmgren that's doing very similar things, and his team is playing well. The Spurs obviously are competitive and winning games. And you're right. We are seeing a ton of young guys starting to step up this season. And that's not even just rookies. These are guys that are, second and third year players. We're talking about a Scotty Barnes. We're talking about an Evan Mobley. We're even seeing guys that are in their primes that are on the same team as KD, like a Devin Booker, who, despite the injury, has just been absolutely dominant and phenomenal this season. So I think we're absolutely seeing a changing of the guard this season. And I mean, the association's in great hands.
No, I agree. And I think that, like you said, Wemby, man, we haven't seen anything like this. And I do believe he's like the catalyst to it all from a marketing perspective as well, right? So I was in our supermarket. We have Kroger's down here, right? So I'm in Kroger walking through and I see like the NBA preview magazine. And typically it would be somebody like LeBron, maybe Curry, KD, these guys would be on the cover. There were 3 players on the cover. On the right was Curry. On the left was LeBron. Dead center, Victor Wembanyama. So the NBA is clear what they're trying to do. I believe that, like you said, the league is in good hands. So I think that's an interesting topic, the changing and changing of the guards and passing the baton. So let's go ahead and move into some preparation for November. So like one thing I like to do is talk to fantasy managers about looking at it like you're in a nuclear fallout and you're in a bunker. Like we're trying to get this championship. And sometimes you need to like stash some rations. You need to put some supplies in the stash and save them for later. What fantasy players should managers look at to stash? Who's like injured or banged up and maybe they could sneak and grab them and stash them in their IL or IR as we go through into November?
Yeah, man. So I think right now, if I'm looking at injured players, I haven't really been taking a look too much at injured guys. What I've really been looking at is just some guys that are kind of, less rostered maybe than you would expect, or maybe just kind of aren't, playing maybe up to what people are expecting or getting up on the radar in 12-team leagues. But what I'm looking at currently right now is some backups or some guys that are maybe making some spot starts that I'm very interested in at the moment. I'm really interested in some backup bigs. I know we've been talking, we talked Kessler, we've talked Wemby, we've been talking some of these big guys, Duren. I'm looking at some backup bigs right now that I think are worth looking at. Drew Eubanks, I think, is somebody that's piqued a lot of people's interest right now, with Yusuf Nurkic as somebody that is potentially going to get banged up here in the near future. Eubanks averaging 1.7 blocks in less than 20 minutes per game. I think Nick Richards over the last 3 games, 11 points, 9 rebounds, 2.3 blocks. Again, playing 20 minutes a night behind Mark Williams. Is there an injury risk there? Is this sustainable production in just 20 minutes? And I think Jaylen Smith, for the Pacers. The Pacers are a lot of fun. They have a lot of talent, on their roster. But Jaylen Smith, 11-6 with 1.3 triples, 73% shooting. He's playing just 16 minutes right now. Any sort of injury to a Miles Turner, to an Obi Toppin, there's going to be a ton of free minutes for him, and I would love to see what he could do with some extra opportunity. So those are 3 guys that I had on my list as potential stashes and guys that are going to be widely available in your fantasy leagues.
That's good. Those are some nuggets right there, Zach. I got one guy in particular that I'm looking at that's available in a lot of spots. Tari Eason. So I was high on him in the offseason. I wrote something with Adam King from Fantasy Basketball International as one of my guys. And him not starting has been like eating me to the core. I'm like, he's not getting any run. He's out, But I understand it's a lot of they have a lot of young talent there, and they'll have to find Ime Udoka is going to have to get creative on how he can find minutes for him. But you saw what he did in summer league. Like, he was really, when he got some action, he put up some numbers. So that's another guy that fantasy managers should think about stashing in November.
Absolutely, man. Tari Eason was phenomenal last season when he was given minutes. As you mentioned, they're going to have to get creative to find him some playing time. But if he can get out there, man, I mean, he can be, what are we talking here? 12 or 13 points, 7 rebounds, and, maybe better than a steal or a block per game. I mean, that's a 12-team guy, every day of the week.
And if we get an injury or something to Jabari Smith or something like that, that changes the game. So I think the stash is a really good decision going into November. So the whole theme of this November episode has been like young guys and the future of the NBA. So let's just keep it going. Which rookies do you think will take a leap in November? So we talked about a bunch of young guys. Which ones do you think are going to take a leap in November?
Yeah, man. So I wrote down a few of them here. When you sent me over these questions last night, and for anybody wanting to peek behind the curtain here, this isn't just off the cuff, hey, Robin throws some questions out. This is, we think about this stuff ahead of time. He sends over the show sheet. We prepare this stuff. And, I have 6 names that I wrote down. And these were easy names to write down. Rookies have been great to start the season. I think the easiest and most obvious, Jordan Hawkins from UConn. With CJ McCollum out, people were wondering, hey, is it going to be Dyson Daniels? Is it going to be Jordan Hawkins? I thought it was going to be Daniels. Full disclosure here. Hawkins has been getting the starts, but Daniels to me is more of a, across the board contributor. But man, this was Hawkins last night. He played 38 minutes. He finished with 31 points, 7 triples, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. He was absolutely lights out last night. So he's the guy. He's a must-add. He's your top waiver priority at the moment. CJ McCollum obviously dealing with the collapsed lung. We're not sure when he's going to return. And he's been dealing with injuries for the last couple of years, having trouble staying healthy. So Jordan Hawkins is a name that you must add. Marcus Sasser for the Pistons. We've already seen him go off. He's averaging 14, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and almost 2 steals per game. 2.5 triples over his last 4. A couple other names to keep in mind. Anthony Black started the last couple of games for the Magic. Cason Wallace started when SGA was out, came back with SGA available last night, had 4 steals off the bench. Keontae George out in Utah, we're waiting for him to get some additional run, but he's looked really good, in just over 20 minutes a game. And somebody that I think is under the radar, Toumani Camara, with Robert Williams looking like he may miss the entire rest of the season for the Blazers. I'm excited to see what Camara can do, maybe with some additional run for Portland.
So you mentioned Dyson Daniels and Jordan Hawkins. I just want to unpack that quickly for fantasy managers, especially early in the month here. So we see this a lot with coaches, maybe testing out different options when we have an injury. So what if someone rushed to the waiver wire yesterday to grab Dyson Daniels and now they have to rush for Jordan Hawkins? What do you think both players' interim value will be, especially with, it seems like CJ, God bless him, he's going to be out for a while, right? So do you think they both have standalone value, or you think it's kind of like one or the other?
I think Daniels can have standalone value. I think really what will be most telling is the Pelicans' next game, because Hawkins isn't going to hit 7 triples a game. That's just not going to happen, right? He's not Steph Curry. He's a kid. He's playing for the Pelicans. And his shooting percentages are typically, from what we've seen so far, they're not great. So I still think there's hope for Dyson Daniels. He's still a guy that can rebound, that can pass well, that can kind of stuff the stat sheet for you. I think Hawkins is the clear priority add right now, but I think Daniels can still have standalone value. But I definitely want to see, kind of how the minutes and the production shake out in the next game.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I know we have folks who are preparing in November, doing this exercise with us to just look ahead and be very proactive. What players should fantasy managers pay close attention to, specifically for regression? And that could be positive or negative regression. Players like we talked about Scotty Barnes, who is like going off. Will he regress in a negative direction? Lauri Markkanen, Cam Thomas, you know, Chet Holmgren is having a great start. Even Desmond Bane. Talk to me about any players that you think fantasy managers just need to keep an eye on as we go into November.
Yeah, there's a few, and I think the ones you mentioned are great. Desmond Bane, obviously, nearly first-round value. Chet Holmgren putting up first-round value as a rookie. And Cam Thomas, ninth in the NBA in scoring. I mean, that's just been a story in itself, right? But I love to see Cam Thomas. He had a 45-point game last night, so that's been wonderful to watch. A couple of guys here that I've been keeping an eye on that have kind of snuck into the top 50, top 75. Lou Dort, not a guy that I expected to have a big fantasy season. He's been really strong with scoring, with his defensive numbers. I'm really curious to see if he can continue on the current pace that he has. Dylan Brooks, it's a guy we've been calling Dylan Bricks for years, and he's one of four guys with a 50, 40, 90 shooting performance to start the season. There's no way that holds. That's just been ridiculous so far. DeAndre Ayton, started out slow the first couple of games, and we've really seen dominating recently. 13.3 rebounds, 2.3 steals. He's been a top 20 guy so far. And with Robert Williams out, does this trend continue? Can Ayton really be that top 20 guy? Can he really live up to the billing of being the number one pick in such a ridiculously strong draft class that's kind of painted him as a bust so far? Especially after the Suns were so eager to get him out of town. And then Derek White, a guy that I think a lot of people kind of, wrote his eulogy when Drew Holiday got traded over to the Celtics. He's been phenomenal so far, but he's shooting almost 65% from the field, which has really boosted his fantasy stock. And to me, there's no way that a guard continues to shoot 65% from the field, especially a guy that shoots triples like he does.
That's good. I hope you folks were taking notes because those are some nuggets. Zach, if you don't mind just sharing your social media handle with the folks and also any upcoming projects or things that you're working on.
Yeah, man. So you can find me on Twitter at Zach the Monster. For Roto World, we do the Q&A. Noah Rubin and I do the Q&A every week live at 4:00 over on the NBC YouTube channel. Today's Tuesday, so every 2 weeks we do a Reddit AMA. We switch turns between the analysts over at Roto World. Robin, hope to get you on that rotation now that you've joined the team. We do the weekly waiver wire column every Friday, so that usually keeps me busy. Usually it's a 3,000-word column on who's hot and who's not, in the world of fantasy hoops. So, yeah, just staying busy, man.
Well, listen, you know how I feel about everything you're doing, Zach, but also just as a friend, you've been super, super, open and welcoming to me. So I'm grateful to be joining the NBC Sports Roto World team and just learning as much as I can from you because you're a brilliant fantasy mind. And I'm happy that I got to go from being a fan to a friend.
I appreciate you, brother. The pleasure has been all mine, man. Absolutely.
All right. Now that you know what to expect in November for fantasy hoops, check out me and Zach's last episode about fantasy basketball trades. This episode was presented to you by BetOnline, where the game starts.